Mario Pinball Land is the product of an interesting time. On one hand, you have an era where Nintendo is taking more risks with its IP than it ever seems to nowadays, hence greenlighting a left field pitch from a tiny UK developer, and hence rolling out the promo train for that game with a cringe-ass commercial and a Happy Meal toy. And on the other hand, this was an era where a pinball spin-off of virtually every game franchise was a matter of course. Now, this period was a little bit late for the pinball craze, but it's not hard to see the appeal. Pinball scratches a particular itch. It's arcadey, a non-committal game with simple and intuitive gameplay that you can pick up and play just for the hell of it. Mario Pinball Land is not like that. I was kind of obsessed with this game as a kid. I'm not joking when I say that it's stuck with me. I have used the Ice Levels music in several videos. I loved it a lot, considering how much I hated it. A couple years ago, I revisited it and found the experience largely the same. I genuinely appreciate some of the design decisions. Each world is a series of pinball tables Frankensteined into an interconnected map which you navigate by slinging little orb boy through assorted apertures. Each room has a star, Mario 64 style, acquired through clearing the room of enemies or otherwise completing some challenge. This game, despite being outsourced to Fuse Games, epitomizes, almost caricaturizes Nintendo's design philosophy. Core gameplay that is no nonsense and internally consistent, with diorama-style worlds delivering varied challenges and set pieces for players to whack that internally consistent gameplay against, like kissing Barbies. But despite all that's praiseworthy, it's fucking pinball. It is commendably creative to reinterpret familiar design conventions like this to apply the adventure platformer structure to a genre that doesn't normally roll that way, but it's also fucking pinball. Outside of a narrow niche of pros, pinball is famously chaotic. It's the easiest way to witness entropy in your day-to-day life. Each stroke of the flipper is as random as a dozen Schrodinger's cats. And if you make a pinball game where the player needs to navigate, that's either a vehicle for them to get extremely frustrated, or a vehicle for them to deepen their familiarity with pinball physics, to appreciate the complexity, and also to get extremely frustrated. Now, I am a defender of games being frustrating. Too much of the popular discourse around game design boils down to, it's bad for games to ever be dissatisfying, difficult, or frustrating. It's bad if there's any puzzle that a player can't solve in seconds through intuition. And I am generally skeptical of any sweeping statement to the effect of, this is what players want, and that's what players don't want. Having said that, by playing Mario Pinball Land, I feel like I'm spitting into the wind and letting God decide whether it hits me in the left eye or the right. Creating a divide between the player and the character can be a powerful tool. It's dramatic irony for the space age. Making the character a pinball and having the player run the paddles? Well, now I feel like I'm Mario's GPS. Please make a U-turn, I beg, while he tears through the cornfield. I'm making suggestions to Spherio. You can learn the game enough that it will get easier, but it'll never be a shoo-in. You can never be certain if Mario's gonna enter that door you're aiming for or bash his head against the wall 3 million times. In some round rooms, Mario just gets hit by a wayward photon and has to work off the zoomies for 10 minutes. Even the top speedrunners of this game have to deal with this shit. And while on some level I do appreciate what that means for how you have to approach this game, I somehow feel like the very deliberate design of the environments and challenges doesn't mesh perfectly with this chaos. I have 100%ed this game 3 times. Now, the bosses in Mario Pinball Land are really nothing to write home about. They're all typical 3-strike affairs with gimmicks that are varying amounts of interesting, with the novelty of doing bosses in pinball at all carrying most of the weight. This is where we come to the subject of this video, my muse, my guiding light. The boss of the desert world is found in the depths of a pyramid, coming to life from a statue form. He's one of the more interesting fights in the game. The gimmick is size. You have to make Mario giant to damage the boss while he tries to hit you with shrinky spells. The spells are virtually unavoidable and tend to hit at the worst possible moment, which is frustrating, but not that much more frustrating than literally anything else in the game. Like all the other bosses, he drops a key which pairs with a corresponding statue to unlock Bowser's castle. Unlike the other bosses, his statue has promo art. So having explained all that, there is still one glaring question. Who is this? And it turns out that's been a point of debate. Some fans, especially early on, have referred to him as Tutankoopa, i.e. the Pharaoh boss from Paper Mario. There's a superficial similarity, and there is one enemy in Pinball Land that could be construed as a pull from Paper Mario, but I don't think anyone's gonna stake their title on claiming these two are the same turtle, yet most of the fan guides from this period use that name. A Japanese Nintendo site from the game's release year refers to him as Boss Nokonoko, i.e. Boss Koopa, and a Japanese guidebook calls him Pharaoh Nokonoko. And of course, A, that's inconsistent, B, that doesn't really help us identify an English name, C, the game was developed in the UK, not Japan, and Japanese name would be a localized name. For a long time, King Tut was treated as his name. It was the name of his page on the Mario Wiki for years. You can still see it on TV Tropes, YouTube, and so on, and it is completely unsubstantiated. There's nothing official that ever said this. In fact, I can't find a single source for it older than the Mario Wiki in 2007. That year, the character page was created and the game page was edited to add the name both by Mr. Benio, an extremely active user at the time who created several wiki pages for Mario Pinball Land content, and who, as far as I can tell, seems to have just fabricated the name King Tut while doing so. More to the point though, King Tut is just not a very good name. Oh shit, it's fucking Napoleon. So King Tut is the name of this character as far as anyone is concerned. Fast forward to 2015, a Super Mario Boards forum thread is created to discuss fixing the Pinball Land wiki pages. The Mariologists in the thread turned to the Game Guide in Nintendo Power issue 185, which refers to the boss as Egyptian Koopa, and the rest is Egyptology. Egyptian Koopa remains the title of the page on Mario Wiki, and it has replaced King Tut as the grossly accepted name of the character. And that's fascinating. It's extremely interesting to me that Nintendo Power is vested with this exegetical authority over the game. The magazine was produced by Nintendo of America, and unless otherwise stated, it's safest to assume that any article published therein was made without the direct input or consultation of any person working on the games. And in fact, the Mario Pinball Land guide, the one that the name Egyptian Koopa comes from, contains multiple errors, not least being that the recurring enemy Spiny is referred to as Spiky. It seems very likely that this article was not written with secret insider information. All this to say, a name put forth by Nintendo Power is not necessarily any truer than a name put forth by a fan. And I think to a certain extent the forum writers knew that. It was brought up in the thread that Nintendo Power contradicted the game manual on a few points, and the decision made was that the manual should override the magazine wherever necessary. But the fact that the magazine gets any say whatsoever, especially considering that while King Tut is a terrible name, Egyptian Koopa is not great either. Mario games almost never name drop real world countries. Is this to suggest that this level, which is called Sandy Area, is actually Egypt? That this is Mario going to Egypt? Or is it just a rare acknowledgement or natural consequence of the obvious yet unspoken fact that what fantasy games often present as desert imagery, pyramids, obelisks, hieroglyphs, and mummies, is actually, in fact, specifically ancient Egyptian imagery? When you pull too hard on that thread, you might be forced to face the fact that the trope of a character who travels to the desert and must enter a pyramid and must plunge into its depths and seize its treasures did not form in a vacuum. The roots of the trope of the Pharaoh's curse lie at the crossroads of colonial extraction and Victorian mysticism, but it really boomed with the craze surrounding the 1922 discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb and the subsequent Universal Pictures mummy film that took heavy inspiration from it. The myth of the curse reflected colonial anxieties and guilt, the idea that archaeologists pouring into an occupied country to dig up its history and export it en masse as a curio, while the inhabitants of that country lacked opportunities movies to participate in this field other than as invisibilized, uncredited laborers might not have been the most ethical practice and could maybe incur mystical consequences for those participating. But it also served to justify extraction and paternalism within these narratives. The civilized Englishmen were juxtaposed against barbarous and mystical Egyptian forces who would use Egypt's history for nefarious ends. This context is the backdrop for the cultural images of the undead mummy, the cursed tomb, and so forth, images that have for decades recurred in movies, video games, and yes, pinball. Now, I can already hear the pelting keyboards of a dozen commenters saying, "Oh my god, you seriously think the pinball game is colonialist?" So I will clarify that I do not think that the imagery in Mario Pinball Land even necessarily cracks like the 10th percentile of serious issues in the world. Mario Pinball Land is shockingly not the linchpin of society. I know, I'm surprised too. I am not accusing this game of being a propaganda piece, I am commenting on the cultural and historical givens that have found themselves reproduced in the game. I do not think that this should preclude anyone from enjoying the game, the series, or whatever else, and even if I did, I could not do anything to stop you. But I do think that there's nothing to gain from pretending that this game and others like it are somehow above being analyzed in this manner, or having their foundational ideological assumptions be pointed out as non-neutral. Let's get back on track. To me, the name Egyptian Koopa, clumsily formed as it is, carrying baggage as it does, reads as dreamed up post hoc, even more so than King Tut does, frankly. It reads like looking at this image and being forced at gunpoint to summarize it in 2 words. We have a character in a game who is never named in the text or the paratext. Why should the name posited by an anonymous columnist, a random person who for all we know has never been within 100 kilometers of any of the devs of that game, be correct in the way that a name any other random person might assign the same character is incorrect? And the answer, of course, is obvious, because the magazine was an officially licensed Nintendo product. And well, I don't consider official to be worth all that much. We're in a time where fan games and mods routinely match or exceed the quality of official franchise releases. Players are looking to fan devs to receive the things that game companies aren't giving. When fan devs are hired to make official games, when fan assets are mistaken for official ones in an official capacity, I don't think we can pretend that games are static and free of context, or that fans are passive and lacking impact. They're the ones having these conversations. They're the ones convening to determine the names of unnamed characters. I think a lot about Mega Man vs. Street Fighter, the fan game that Capcom officially endorsed. There are a couple questions that keep popping into my head when I think about it. One, why do we leave it to Capcom to legitimize the fan game? An unrelated team taking over like the ship of Theseus is not even close to unheard of in game franchises, so why should that get more credence than a fan game? And 2, what makes this game specifically the one that Capcom chose to legitimize? Surely it's not just quality, because there are droves of extremely polished fan projects out there. This is why it's fascinating that fan discussions routinely try to disregard fans. I don't think that you need to present an itemized list of every fanfic a character appears in order to weigh in on that character, but is a discussion of the history of competitive Smash complete if you don't mention Project M? In a discussion or summary of this character, the fact that he was most broadly known as King Tut for 8 years is something I would consider worthy of mention. And I mean, obviously I feel that way considering I'm making this whole video just to mention it, but mentioning something like that is not on the agenda for a fan wiki, even though the fan wiki is why the discussion happened to begin with. And in the same way that the wiki looked to Nintendo Power to determine the name, the wiki's decision to adopt this name is akin to defining the name. If anybody wants to talk about this game, wants to refer to this character by name, they're probably going to get it either directly from Mario Wiki or from a source that got it from Mario Wiki. And that name was determined in this forum thread. You can call it a discovery, and some rigor was involved in it, but it was ultimately a decision. This was fans coming to a decision, and thereby defining the term that fans would use when engaging engaging with this game forever. And that is mind-bending against the image fan wikis put up of objectivity, of observation, of freedom from bias, an image that they etch in part through style and register, which occasionally read like the echo of an old-time anthropologist, and in part through their stringent adherence to the official, the canonical, in the manner that a science paper might defer to the proven and the demonstrable. In some ways, fan wikis of this size are often more rigorous than large swaths of even Wikipedia. Dozens of Egyptian workers, including children, labored towards the unearthing of Tutankhamun's tomb. It was one of these workers who discovered the location of it to begin with. Most sources credit the discovery to Howard Carter. There is no concrete record of the name of the worker who made the discovery. You know, something that I just keep thinking about. A lot of people don't like Mario Pinball Land, but criticism of it just tends to be absently directed towards Nintendo. Bro, did you know that Nintendo made a fucking Mario Pinball game? What was Nintendo thinking? And I'm just like, babes, Nintendo didn't do this one. And you can see this little quirk pop up all the time in discussions if you know where to look for it. Doesn't matter if it's Mario Pinball Land, Mario Tennis, the Minish Cap, it all just gets credited to the faceless Nintendo. I wonder where that comes from. A lot of people like to deride the concept of fandom. Even people who, for all intents and purposes, are members of fandoms themselves often can't resist the allure of deriding other brands of fanaticism, be it by calling them banal, obsessive, immature, uncritical, immoral, or any number of other pejoratives. But I don't think it can be denied that fandoms produce a particular and interesting epistemology that mirrors and replicates trends that might be witnessed in a variety of subcultures and, yes, fields of study. One such example is consensus in nomenclature. Fanfic writers agree on the name of a ship, speedrunners agree on the name of a skip, but unique are those who purport to operate not on consensus but on fact, who turn to the strata of licensed material in search of that fact. And while looking in that manner at the detritus of licensed material does raise my eyebrow vis-a-vis the hermeneutic authority that is seated on the basis of, frankly, capital, it still galvanized this captivating example of a discursively produced playbook, a set of rules for engagement that carved out another set of rules for engagement. To the developer of the game, the name of this character never warranted being stated. To the uncredited writer, that name will fill a blank header in the guide. To a single wiki user, the name assigns discursive space to the character, makes them real, proves that we see them as a character and not as a footnote in the page of the game. And to the conclave of eminent users who convocated in the forum, there's a responsibility to make the name the truest that it can be. The truth that is excavated from the base of that pyramid becomes the truth moving forward. Did anyone in this process know? Did the writer know the rhetorical significance that would be given to the guide? Did the devs know that anyone would even care about the name of this character? Because of what a wiki strives to be, the discussions that shape it are invisible, and the choices surrounding notability and veracity are presented not as choices at all, but as objective reality. This situation raises questions about the role the internet plays in maintaining records, presenting information, and establishing bias. It likewise highlights the methodologies that must be established to situate fact within fiction, and the systematizing of authority within those methodologies. To what extent does the investigation and its subsequent decisions speak to an earnest desire for a consistent framework for discussing this game and a pursuit of the closest thing to an official statement that can enable that? To what extent does it vouch for the validity of fandom phenomenology? And to what extent does it make plain the reality of the corporate stranglehold over both production and reception of art and media, and the means through through which sources and claims and facts are given credence, including in potentially more serious matters. Which art is afforded the right to be seen as legitimate? On what grounds does an interpretation achieve legitimacy, and in deference to whose authority? The internet, like any other medium of communication, has never been untouched by bias. All I can say is, we might need to reassess a few paradigms. Thank you for watching. You can check me out on Tumblr if you're interested. Here's what I'll end on. I have this screenshot of a thread that I found in 2021. I cannot find it. I think it's been deleted. I've tried Googling it with quotes and it doesn't come up, but I swear to God, this was real. I saw this page for myself. I'm pretty sure there was only one commenter in the thread just saying like, no. But the person who initiated this thread, I want to know them. I want to understand them. This person envisions a better version of the world. He may not be in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but he's in our hearts.